Welcome back to FPL Therapy, the weekly podcast hosted by me, FPL Raptor, where each week we are joined by a different guest. And for Game Week 8, I'm delighted to say we have FPL Tom. Tom has been making FPL videos on YouTube for over 2 years now and is extremely close to hitting 10,000 subscribers. I really do highly recommend checking out his channel. And if everyone watching goes to subscribe to Tom, we'll definitely hit 10,000. So please do go support him. I definitely recommend checking the content out. Also, Tom has a football channel called Tom Langford, where he's been uploading some pretty cool videos. I recently watched your vlog where you went to Sweden, which was absolutely brilliant. So I also recommend checking out that channel as well. So 2 new channels for you. They'll both be linked down below in the description. Definitely check them out. But Tom, how are you doing, mate?
Yeah, I'm really good. Thank you for having me on, man. I appreciate it. We spoke a little bit off camera and I said, it's a little bit of a surreal experience for me. You were kind of one of the main inspirations for me starting my own channel. So to be sat here today is a dream come true, really.
That's amazing. And I feel even more privileged because your content's very good as well. So I'm going to take full credit for your good content. That's what I do. But yeah, so today's episode, obviously we've had the international break. So I don't feel like it's as suitable to do what we normally do, which is review the games from the previous game week, because honestly, game week 7 feels like it was an age ago now. So what we're actually going to do is just look ahead. I asked for some of your questions on social media around some of the key players, structures, decisions moving forward, fixture swings, wildcards, and much, much more. And we'll be discussing all of that today. And also, this podcast has been sponsored by Club, the brilliant free-to-play fantasy football game. I really recommend checking it out. There'll be a link down below to start your Club journey, and we'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. But massive shout out to Club for continuing to sponsor the podcast. So, whilst I just said that Game Week 7 did feel like it was a bit of an age ago, we should just have a little bit of a review. And I feel like Tom probably doesn't necessarily want to do that. But yeah, so we've both had fairly rocky starts to the season, but in Game Week 7, I recovered slightly, and unfortunately it wasn't a great one for you. So I'll read it out for those that are listening on audio, and you can just talk us through kind of how your team's getting on and how your season's gone thus far. So Tom managed to get 42 points. In goal, we've got Raya, Robertson in defence, Konsa and Greaves. And I'll let you explain why that was so painful that all of those blanked. The midfield was a little bit better, actually. So we had Saka, Mbeumo, Salah and Rodgers. Saka and Mbeumo obviously did very well. And then sadly, 3 blanks in the attack with Haaland, Vardy, Calvert-Lewin. I did say to you off camera, like looking at this team, it genuinely doesn't look bad. And I would be honest with you, I like roasting the guests. I would tell you if it didn't look like a good team, but I look at that and it is. It's got a nice structure. You've got the 3 premiums. Yeah, I'll tell it just in case you need to remind yourself, but talk us through it and how your season's gone thus far.
I mean, to be honest, the season so far, it's been the worst start I've ever had, which is kind of a weird one because I'm doing like really well on YouTube. Obviously, you've invited me on here. It would have been nice to come in here and be like, yeah, top 1 mil, nice start to the season. It hasn't gone that way. In terms of last week as well, the defence, a little bit comical, to be honest. Obviously, Robertson not starting the game. Liverpool went on to keep a clean sheet, so that's kind of 5 points missed out there. Konsa as well. That pretty much looked like that was always going to be a clean sheet because United never really looked like scoring. Then, of course, his hamstring went pop. And again, 1 pointer. And then the final defender I did play was actually Mykolenko. There was rumours kind of circulating. I think it was from like Ukrainian media outlets that he was injured or picked up some sort of injury, but there was nothing confirmed from Daesh. So I thought I'll play him. Hopefully he starts. Again, Everton went on to keep a clean sheet. So
just to confirm, you've got Raya in goal playing for the best defence in the league at home against the newly promoted side. And then you've got 3 defenders playing for 3 teams that all kept clean sheets. And you come away with 2-1-1-0. Like FPL is a cruel game. It really is. But I said you're in a really nice structure because I think the structure moving forward that people want to be in is the Haaland plus 2 premium midfielders probably. And you do still have Salah. And we're going to discuss Salah in a little bit of detail today because people will be wondering kind of what to do with him moving forward.
Yeah.
But this team isn't bad. It's just one of those where it's just frustrating because it's not panning out the way you want at the moment. Cool. So I'm going to boast now. My game week went a lot better. There are some conspiracy theories going around that I only invite guests on that are doing worse than me. And I am not going to address those allegations. But it does appear to be that way every single time. But so I played my wild card in game week 7. God, this was ages ago since I played this. But yeah, I played my wild card in game week 7. I obviously delayed playing it in game week 6. I had a really good game week 6. And in all honesty, I'm really happy with how the wild card went. So it was 59 points all out. I also had Raya and Gabriel. So double Arsenal defence conceding wasn't great. I had Lewis, who got the assist towards the end, and then Leif Davis, who got me a big fat 0, despite creating a massive chance. And then I had 8 Nuri's 9-pointer on the bench. Oof. So that was painful. it's just one of those things. Davis actually had higher expected goal involvement than Aït-Nouri. So on another day, Davis is the one that gets the attacking returns. Both of which, by the way, playing for awful defences, Davis and Aït-Nouri. But they've got such attacking threat that I don't really mind. The midfield was Rodgers, Saka, Palmer and Mbeumo. Listen, there was some temptation to captain Saka, and also there was some temptation to play Aït-Nouri, but at the end of the day, I didn't make those decisions, so we just have to live with it. The forward line was a little bit better though, so Cunha got me a 9-pointer, and I'm so happy with this pick because now I'm starting to see people discuss bringing him in. And that was the point with Cunha and Aït-Nouri, was that how can you look ahead? And we're going to discuss that later today of you want to attack the immediate game weeks, but you also want to think, how can I get ahead slightly with some of these transfers? And on my wildcard, I thought, do you know what? I know Wolves haven't been good. And by the way, against Brentford, they were stinking. But I know that from game week 10 onwards, given their fixtures, that there will be some assets that we start to look at. So Cunha's 9-pointer was wonderful. Solanke got the single assist again, and we'll discuss Solanke a bit later today because people are starting to get worried that he's not shown as much goal threat, and he seems to be the one that's distracting the defenders almost. And then I own Erling Haaland for the first time this season, and he's terrible. I don't know what all the fuss was about. Like, what's all the fuss about? Why did we all want him that desperately? And obviously, Tom didn't own Haaland for the first 4 game weeks. Wildcarded him in 5.
Yeah, wildcarded him in 5.
For the Arsenal game. So he gets you a goal there, but then he goes on and blanks twice after that.
Yeah.
Where are the hat-tricks that we were promised?
I know, yeah.
We were promised hat-tricks. But yeah, now you can all stop bugging me about you got your own Erling Haaland. Now I'm starting to get people say you need to sell Erling Haaland, which is it's just the way FPL is at the moment. But anyway, 59 points in the wild card. Absolutely delighted. Let's now move forward. And I have heard it on good authority that if you come onto FPL Therapy, you're guaranteed a green arrow.
Oh, I hope so.
So that is that is what we'll be getting for game week 8 and beyond. So as I said, the focus for today is just going to be on some of those key teams and players and how we need to be thinking about structuring our team moving forward. And the first is actually around Trent and Liverpool, because you don't have Trent, right? You've got Robertson instead, but I don't have Trent either. But a lot of people are looking at their teams. And probably if you've got Trent, you're on like a 2 premium structure where you've got probably like Saka and Haaland. You probably don't have a 3rd premium. But there are, obviously, Salah is continuing to look really good. Palmer has been absolutely brilliant. Son, if he's fit with the fixtures come out, could be good. Foden's going into a nice fixture run. Even Watkins, you could call a premium. Yep. Lots of people are looking at that now and thinking, is Trent going into a fixture run of Chelsea, Arsenal, Brighton, Villa, Southampton, City? Is he sellable? Or if you owned Trent, you just think, he's like just over 7 million. He's getting so many chances to get attacking returns. He's got the clean sheets. Like, where do you stand on Trent at the moment?
I think my position on Trent has actually changed over the past few days, mainly down to that Alisson injury, because I've done a little bit of kind of digging into the kind of importance of him. So far this season, he is 3rd for goals prevented out of all goalkeepers in the league. So he's kept Liverpool in a lot of games. I think as well, the way that Liverpool have set up this season as well has been a lot more where they're prioritising their defensive structure rather than the attack. And I think that's had implications on not only, the defenders doing so well, but also Mohamed Salah and the other attackers getting less opportunities. And I think that injury to the goalkeeper, it might seem very insignificant, and they do have a good backup goalkeeper, but for me, it feels so imperative for these more difficult fixtures where sometimes the goalkeeper has to bail that defence out. Yep. Thinking back to Raya against City, how many saves did he make to keep them within that game? Alisson is one of those goalkeepers that we've seen throughout his time in the Premier League, has the ability to make massive saves that not only keep Liverpool in the game, but actually go on to keep them the clean sheet and win games as well. So I think, yes, Trent has still got the obvious attacking potential. We've seen his data's still pretty good. There's no getting around that. And he definitely seems a kind of, rejuvenated player. I feel towards the back end of Klopp, it was a little bit dicey whether or not he was going to commit his future and stuff like that. Obviously doing quite well for England at the moment as well. So from an attacking standpoint, yes. But I look at those next set of fixtures and I think, where's there going to be a clean sheet? And that should be the bread and butter for your defenders. Where are they going to get a clean sheet from? Yeah,
we always have this narrative of, I don't own Trent for the clean sheet side of the attacking, but you do need the clean sheets because he will not get, based on what we've seen, is he's still on 1 attacking return so far this season in the Premier League, which is the same number as Leif Davis, for example. So you do need the clean sheets as well. And why Trent has done so well to this point is, yes, he's got that 1 assist, but it's the clean sheets. And if the clean sheets go, but then he starts to get more attacking returns, great. But you do need both of them for that price. And if you're telling me it's selling Trent to be able to afford a 3rd premium attacker, someone that's on penalties, maybe with better fixtures, it's like, at that point, it does start to become a tricky decision to try and keep him. I just look, even if Alisson was there, Chelsea and Arsenal in the next 2, Chelsea have been exceptionally good going forward. For all you can say defensively, by the way, they've also not been bad defensively. The next 2, Chelsea and Arsenal, I don't see a clean sheet. And it is always possible in a big game like that. Maybe Arsenal play for a slightly tighter game and it ends 0-0. or Chelsea just have a bit of an off day, but I just don't see it. And then they even go into Brighton and Villa, and they are, again, two teams that attack very well. Brighton and Villa have been pretty rubbish defensively, so maybe there's the chance for attacking returns there for Trent. Southampton is obviously fantastic, but then Man City. So if I look at that as a sort of next 6 fixtures, there will absolutely, for me, definitely be a Liverpool clean sheet there, because there always are, especially when you're playing for such a good defence, but I don't see more than 1 or 2. And then if we say optimistically he gets 3 attacking returns, it's still only 5 returns in 6, and other defenders out there could probably get you 2 or 3 for much cheaper. So I am probably of the opinion that if you are going to sell Trent, now's the time. I think you either commit to keeping him throughout this spell, or you say right now, going into Chelsea at home, this is the week I want to do it, especially if you're moving to Palmer, because you basically got Palmer up against Trent. So if you're backing Chelsea to score, Palmer's probably going to be involved. Trent loses the clean sheet. This might not be a bad week to do it. And we'll talk about Palmer in a second, because maybe it's not the best entry point for him, but I do just wonder if right now might be a good time to just make that switch, back Chelsea to score this week, and then maybe consider just going without Trent for a little bit. Maybe from sort of game week 13, 14 onwards, we look to go back. But I have found in my tinkering that once you lose Trent, getting back to him is going to be really tough. Not only because of money tied up, but finding money to then go back into your defence once you've taken it out. It almost does feel like if you go without Trent now, you're committing quite long term.
Yeah.
So in terms of that pivot point, we'll talk about Palmer in a bit more detail in a second, but would you agree that it's this week, or do you look at kind of next week instead, when Palmer's got Newcastle at home, Trent's got Arsenal away? Like, would you make the pivot this week when they play against each other, or next week when there's a more definitive fixture swing for Palmer?
I think I would wait till next week for me. I think the big thing as well with this Liverpool defence, they have been the best defence in the league for expected goals conceded, but they've not really played anyone big. You know what I mean? You're looking across the next set of fixtures, they're playing Chelsea, who've been really good, City, Arsenal. This is where it's going to be tested. And I want to maybe see how they get on in this Chelsea game. If they still look really, really good defensively, you know, the Alisson injury is not too much of an impact. And I think maybe it could be worth holding on to Trent for that period. So maybe giving it 1 more week.
They might become the new Arsenal. Yeah. They may well, where, you know, with Gabriel, I'll play him every week. I don't care because I know Arsenal, well, we think, maybe they're not anymore, but we think Arsenal are that good defensively. If Liverpool get to a point where they're putting up similar defensive data to what we see from Arsenal, plus you've got Trent's attacking threat, then maybe I was wrong and fixtures don't really matter, but we don't know that yet. Even Slot himself said, we've not yet played against the team in the top half of the table. He absolutely roasted Man United in saying that, but what he was saying is, we've not had that real test. And maybe once they get that real test, we'll start to see them struggle a little bit more. Just on Trent's data, so he's got 0.43 expected assists per 90, which is an absolute joke for a defender. That makes him the 4th best in the Premier League. And obviously top for all defenders. But when I watched Liverpool, I didn't necessarily feel like, especially in recent weeks, that he's had that same level. So I tried to delve into the data a little bit more. And he's actually only created, and I say only, for a defender it's still quiet, but only created 5 big chances so far this season, which is less than 1 a week. If you look at Bukayo Saka, who I know is a completely different position and he's an expensive attacker, but he's created 12 big chances. We're used to Trent being right at the top in terms of creating those clear-cut chances, and I feel like he's creating lots of chances, but lots of smaller ones. So it's actually the same number of big chances as my favourite defender at the moment, Leif Davis, Tielemans, Mbeumo, Bernardo Silva. So Trent's data is always going to be strong, and you have to look at that XA and just say he is very creative, but he's not creating those chances where he's putting it on someone's foot from a yard out where you're like, they've got to finish it. And maybe that's why we're not seeing as many assists, because yes, he's creating such a large quantity that you might expect 1 or 2 to go in, but I've not seen him, I think, create, in the last 2 weeks, he's had 1 big chance created. He's not creating those real clear-cut chances. So if that doesn't change moving forward, it's one of those, again, where you can look at data at face value and just say he's got good creativity, but then if you delve a bit deeper, I'm not as convinced. So listen, I don't want it to be like anti-Trent, because I think he's like one of my favourite players. And when I watch Liverpool games, I said this like 5 weeks ago on FPL Therapy, I hate watching Liverpool games without Trent. I would go as far as saying it makes me more scared not having Trent than Salah when I watch a Liverpool game. Like I can't stand not having Trent. So I understand why you'd want him. I just don't think we're seeing quite enough from him in terms of those clear-cut opportunities with the fixtures going forward that I think he's an auto keep. Something to assess across the next 2 weeks. Maybe next week is the best sort of pivot point. So let's say that you are selling Trent this week to try and fund a Palmer or a Salah or Son or Foden, whoever you go for. Do you have any standout cheap defenders, let's say preferably below 5 million, that kind of stand out to you that you'd look to replace Trent with?
Yeah, so for me, I think just from an eye test perspective, I've watched quite a few Wolves games purely by accident this season. And Eight Nori every single time is just in the right position. You're going, you shouldn't be there for a defender. What are you doing there? Also, I really like Rico Lewis. The same pretty much applies for that. He's just on the edge of the box, in the box, and you're like, again, I don't think you should be there as a defender. And when you kind of see their price as well, I think they've got so much potential. Obviously, the problem with Eight Nori is he is on 3 yellow cards. You wouldn't realistically want to play him against City this week. So if he picks up a yellow in that fixture, again, maybe it is worth holding off that Trent move to Eight Nori till next week when, you know, Wolves go on this fantastic run. I think it's all the way till around Christmas. They've got just amazing.
Yeah, back GAMEWEEK 18, exactly.
Yeah. So that would probably be the one. And I know you've already brought Leif Davis in, so you're probably a better man to kind of do his PR work here. But again, watching him, it feels very similar to Alfie Doherty last season, where you're not really expecting a clean sheet from Ipswich, but the attacking potential is definitely there.
Well, what you've just said there, you've just spoken about 3 attacking defenders, and we've not even talked about clean sheets, and that's because like they're not really happening for many teams. I was going to say if your name's not Liverpool or Arsenal, but even Arsenal aren't keeping as many clean sheets as we've seen in recent weeks. So I'm not saying that you completely disregard defensive data, because you do need clean sheets as well. Because if Leif Davis concedes 5 goals every week, even if he gets an assist, he's not getting close to bonus because he's conceding so much. So you need to play defenders that don't play for awful defenses, preferably. But at the same time, if you're saying, oh, maybe go for like a Colwill or a Van der Ven instead because they're playing for a slightly better defence, I don't see clean sheets for, even with Spurs' great fixtures, which we'll discuss in a bit, I don't see clean sheets across the next 4, really. Colwill's going into a tricky fixture run. I don't really see any defenders at that cheap price that are playing for good defence with good fixtures other than Rico Lewis, who also has the attacking threat as well. So, yeah, in terms of cheap defender replacements, I've got a list here, so I'll just read it out for those of you on audio. This is in order of preference for me. I've gone for Lewis. Second, I've actually got Udogie, who I'll discuss in a bit. Then Leif Davis. Then actually Anthony Robinson, who's the forgotten man because we all sold him. But now he's actually going into an okay fixture run. And Fulham have been relatively okay defensively this season. Then Eight Nuri. Then Colwill, then Aina or Milenkovic, whoever you want to go for from Forest, because they've been defending well. Then Anderson, who's down at 4.4 million if you're looking for a cheaper asset. And then like Pinnock, Collins, any of the Brentford defenders. So I kind of all 5 of my defenders at the top there, Lewis, Udogie, Davis, Robinson, Eight Nuri, they've got some attacking threat. Just on Udogie, we'll discuss Spurs in a bit. I don't see many clean sheets, and I know he's more expensive than Van der Ven, and his attacking data this season hasn't been brilliant. He's playing a more subdued role. But I just think for that little bit extra, still getting him for an okay price, I just wonder if it might be worth going for him. Ideally, you'd get to Pedro Porro, but I think Udogie might be worth the extra little bit of money on Van der Ven. And then on Leif Davis and Eight Nuri, like they're the 2 that I went for. Do I regret it? No, because I think they've got the attacking threat that you're just expecting. Like a goal and an assist for Eight Nuri is a joke. Like Leif Davis had 0.34 expected assist in GameWeek 7. He created a huge chance for Greaves. Leif Davis takes every single set piece for Ipswich. Like you're getting defenders that are either playing virtually as attackers or they're on every single set piece. Like they're worth having at that cheap price. But at the same time, I saw them concede 3 and 4 goals respectively. Like I am not expecting clean sheets. And as I said, the thing is with bonus points. So if you've not seen the changes to bonus points this season, for every goal conceded, they lose 4 in the bonus point system. I think it is. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's
4?
correct.
Yeah, so they lose 4 in the bonus points. So if you concede 1 goal, you are absolutely still on for bonus points as a defender if you get an attacking return. If you're starting to concede 3 and 4 goals, you're losing like 16 points in the bonus point system. There's no way you get bonus points, even if you get a goal and an assist. And we saw that with Eight Nuri. You got a goal and an assist in a single game. Wasn't close to bonus because you need some level of, you're not conceding that number of goals. So I need Ipswich and Wolves to defend slightly better for me to say that it's worth it, because you want the bonus points that go with the attacking returns, basically.
I think the thing on Wolves, though, is you have to look at the start of the season they've had in terms of the fixtures. I think their defence will actually improve, and across this good run, I think they will pick up clean sheets. And some of the other names you mentioned on there as well, obviously the Brentford defenders, I'm actually a really big fan of those guys as well, purely because of the way that Brentford play. Not because of the defensive data, that's actually been pretty terrible this season, but it's the way that Brentford set up to basically exploit parts of the game that most teams don't see, and that is set pieces, throw-ins, and what they've actually started doing as well. There's a great video I watched the other day about it, kickoffs.
It's incredible.
All the games they've scored from, I think it's like the past 3, they've scored within the first 2 minutes of the game.
That's 4.
That's 4, there we go.
Incredible, yeah.
But they've found a way to exploit kickoffs. So it's the same setup every single time. And I think when you've got a team like that, that are looking to gain like just 1 or 2% margins, picking a defender where most of the time those set pieces, they will be the ones on the end of it, could be a route to potentially some points that people aren't seeing.
Collins' goal was the one that was the first goal in the first 2 minutes, and he was in the box, and it wasn't a set piece. He literally just marauded up the pitch. So I think with Collins and Pinnock, they're good in the air. They should be fairly good for minutes. Vandenberg's another interesting one, because I've got him on my wild card, but he's definitely not nailed. And once Henry comes back, which should be very soon, it might push other players out to the right, in which case Vandenberg's probably not worth going for if you need him to start every week.
Yeah.
On Pinnock Collins, do you have a preference? Like, have you spoke to any Brentford fans? Because they seem to disagree whenever I speak to them about this one.
I think I would probably go for Pinnock. And the main reason is when I've watched Brentford in the past, he seems to usually be the one. Maybe they've changed that this season, but he's usually the one that is the kind of the main threat from corners and free kicks. And when it goes to throw-ins, he's usually the one that's kind of hovering around the penalty spot, waiting for the flick on to come in rather than going for the flick on itself.
Okay, perfect. So just to recap, top 3 Trent replacements then?
I'd probably go, go Lewis number 1,
Yep.
Aït-Nouri number 2. You know what? We'll throw a Brentford defender in there. We'll go Pinnock or Collins in 3.
Okay, perfect. And then I've gone Lewis, Udogie, Davis as my top 3. I would, if you ask me next week, Aït-Nouri would probably sneak into 3rd, but just obviously if you need him this week, then obviously not the best fixture this week. Cool. So elsewhere on Liverpool, question we got from one of the viewers, and thank you again for sending your questions in. And by the way, I forgot to even say, please do make sure to like and subscribe. You think I've been doing this for long enough to say that now. Please like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube, and also make sure to rate 5-star on podcast. But this viewer said, what to do with Liverpool assets, as it seems we keep choosing the incorrect ones at the same time. Is it worth just sticking to one of Jota, Diaz and hope for the best, or do we just avoid them altogether? So ignore kind of Trent and Salah now. We'll discuss Salah in a second. Mm-hmm. On Jota, Diaz, is it worth just sticking one of them in and keeping them there because they will go on these hot runs? Is it worth trying to time it? Is it worth switching them around? Or do we just go, nope, there are other players that are more nailed that are worth having instead?
I think it's worth timing them correctly because of the team that they play for. The same goes for any of these top teams, Arsenal, City, Liverpool. They are so good at creating big opportunities, scoring lots of goals, that when they have decent fixtures, and if you've got maybe a feeling or you kind of have seen something, maybe you know that there's certain injuries in the squad, Jota or Diaz are going to probably play more minutes, then I definitely think they're worth the gamble because of the teams that they play for and that explosivity in terms of points and stuff like that. However, now we're starting to enter this period where it's going to start to get a little bit more difficult because fixtures are starting to pile up. You've got Champions League. I think there's 8 game weeks from game week 12 to game week 16, 17, something around there.
Yep.
All compact within December. So trying to pick a player during that period, you're probably better going for somebody like an Mbeumo, a Maddison. I feel that a lot more secure within the sides. There's not too much competition. Again, Mbeumo's got to be the one because he's taking penalties. Is probably the second best player in the game, realistically, because of what he offers for the side. So I do think it is worth going for the Liverpool assets when the time is right. But obviously, that's part of the fun of the game, isn't it, really? Getting those timings right. But for me, the explosivity that they have, it's just definitely worth going for. Yeah,
like you saw 51 points in 5 weeks for Diaz. Like if you'd have got on that at the right point, and it's easier said than done. Like last week with Simon March, the psychology episode, we talked about timing and why timing is so difficult in FPL. But this isn't the time for me because of Champions League, because of Chelsea, Arsenal, Brighton, Villa in the next 4. I'm just looking at their fixtures now. I think game week 18 onwards, which is Boxing Day, they've got Leicester, West Ham, United, Forest, Brentford, Ipswich, Bournemouth, Wolves.
Yeah.
That might be the time that we start looking at the likes of Jota and Diaz again. Not necessarily Trent and Salah, just because they're more nailed on. But I think especially from Forest onwards, which is 21, which is the 14th of Jan, that's post that little break in January. And then they've got one game every week roughly for that little spell there. Yeah. I think that might be the time, especially when they've got Ipswich, Bournemouth, Wolves in 3 weeks. That might be the time to start jumping back on them.
Is it the final 2 weeks of the Champions League towards the back end of January?
Could be potentially. So maybe even...
I think they've extended it because of the 8 game weeks.
So it might be worth looking at how they're doing. Because if they're still putting out the strongest 11 then... The thing is, we're trying to get all these trends of like, is Gakpo starting midweek? And I just don't know with Slot. Like we've not seen enough of him to start looking at trends of when he plays certain players and how much he's going to favour sort of a starting 11. Because we said he's never going to rotate that starting 11 based on the first few, and then Gakpo comes in and then Jota misses one out. And maybe it's going to be a little bit more difficult than we first thought because we were hoping that he would just start the same 11 every single week, and it's never that easy.
No.
Konate's an interesting one worth discussing. Just over that 5 million price, only 4 points less than Trent. more attacking returns than Trent. And remember, he didn't start the first game. If he'd have got that clean sheet in game week 1, he'd have more points than Trent, or the same number now. Is there any interest, even with the tricky fixtures, getting a defender for such a decent defence? Let's say you're looking to replace Trent and you've got the money for Konate. Would you still prefer those other options of Lewis, Aitner, etc., or do you think there is some justification to go for Konate?
I don't think there's any justification to go for Konate.
Okay.
I think, again, we spoke about the fixtures there being really difficult. I do feel Liverpool maybe will keep 1 to 2 clean sheets during that period, and that is where he has picked up a large majority of his points from. I think as well, with Kwanzaa signing a new deal, it does show that there is confidence in him. His recent performances so far this season haven't been great. I think it was the own goal in the Carabao Cup. Yeah. First game week, obviously coming off at half-time, but again, during that busier Christmas period, Champions League, Carabao Cup, I do feel he will start to see some minutes across that period. And I think when we kind of compare it to the other cheaper defenders we spoke about, around the 4.5 to around 4.8 million, I feel they've got so much more upside compared to Konate. And I feel, especially Aitner, I don't really see him being dropped by Wolves at any point this season. Lewis, again, kind of fits into that bracket, but it seems like he's gone up a level in terms of Pep's kind of hierarchy of defenders. It seems like he loves him.
Yeah.
So that's probably why.
And if he doesn't start in defence, it looks like he's going to be in midfield. Even for England, he came on, I think it was for Gomez, in midfield, like just a straight up midfield position. So I would never say that Lewis is nailed in a million years, but I feel like he's significantly more first choice than we potentially previously thought. I do think he gets benched in one of the next few games, probably Lewis, but you take that as part of it because he's got the upside there with clean sheet and attacking threat. The only other Liverpool player I wanted to discuss was obviously Salah. I'll let you take this one as well because you have Salah in your team. How are you feeling about him at the moment? Obviously, you've not got Palmer as a result. Do you see yourself keeping Salah through this period, or are you looking to remove him soon?
The thing is, if you look at a lot of the projected points models, they actually have Salah coming out on top over the likes of Saka and Palmer. And that is making me currently question my decision. Now, obviously, there's other factors that have to go in play. I don't just use, predicted points to go, that's it, I'm just going to stick with those. But it is making me think, it's not just like one model, it's like 4 or 5 models all have Salah by quite a few points as well, outscoring Palmer. And it is starting to make me think, okay, maybe I need to kind of look at this decision. I think in terms of like projected goal involvements as well for future games, has Liverpool coming out on top. I think Chelsea around 7th, Liverpool are 3rd or 2nd in terms of that as well. So they are expecting them to do quite well. And I think with Salah as well, I think he's probably going to be my captain in game week 12 if I was to keep him over Cole Palmer, which is a big gamble.
I like it though.
But I think that Southampton fixture is better than Leicester away. For me, I think Southampton will come bottom of the Premier League.
Yeah.
They just look terrible at the back.
They really definitely look like the worst team to target. Like Leicester and Ipswich have a bit about them in certain games. We've not seen that as much from Southampton fans. I think the reason, so if you look at models, let's say like FPL Review or something like that, they're looking at a move to remove Haaland in 10 to bring in Salah.
Yeah.
We're going to discuss Haaland in one of the future sections because there are people questioning whether they need him for this period here. But it's that Brighton, Villa, Southampton. When you glance at that, you say Brighton and Villa, not bad teams, but defensively they've both been really shaky across the season. And if Konsa is out longer term or Villa have their issues, Brighton just seem to be going all out for goals.
Yeah.
Both of those are at home at Anfield. Like you could see Salah doing very well. Then he goes into Southampton away. So I am genuinely eyeing up bringing in Salah in 10. So I know for Salah owners, they've got Chelsea and Arsenal next, and it's like not the best 2 fixtures. Liverpool not have dropped off as such, but they've not looked as lethal as they were at the start of the season. I understand there might be temptation. I would probably urge Salah owners to keep hold for a couple of weeks and let's see. Let's say Haaland bangs in like back-to-back hat-tricks and Palmer's doing really well. You might think, you know what, Salah's not the one. But let's say Salah does well against Chelsea and Arsenal going into 3 very good fixtures. It's going to completely switch, I think. And I can see Salah owners being very happy that they've still got him. So yeah, I would probably hold fire on selling Salah at the moment, especially if it's someone like Cole Palmer, who has Liverpool, obviously, this week. So they're playing against each other. Anything could happen in that game. And even then next week, he's got Newcastle. So let's discuss Cole Palmer. Such a difficult one to try and advise on. Like, I'm really struggling. Like content creators, obviously, we've got great jobs, right? But there are certain decisions where it's like, I don't really know which way I want to lean here because I agree that the next 4 fixtures in total aren't good. Liverpool away, Newcastle at home, United away, Arsenal at home. As a 4, no, they're not good. And I'm not expecting a 25-pointer for Palmer in any of those fixtures. But those middle 2 fixtures, they're not bad. Like Liverpool away, but then Newcastle at home. hit and miss with Newcastle. Let's see how they get on in game week 8. But against City, they were brilliant.
Yeah.
Previous to that, they looked really, really poor defensively, I think. And then United, that's a great fixture. He scored 3 or 4 goals against us last year. That's a fantastic fixture for Palmer. And even Arsenal, they don't look quite as secure as we saw at points last season. So maybe it's because I've got him, but I look at the next 4 and I'm like, no, he's not going to get crazy number of chances. But if I told you that Palmer returns in the next 4 games, would you be that surprised? I don't think you necessarily would. So talk to me about Palmer. How do you stand? Because you don't own him at the moment, so it's maybe a bit easier for you to discuss.
I mean, me and Cole Palmer have probably a love-hate relationship this season. I took him out of my wild card.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
There have been so many of those stories.
Yeah. And obviously, since then, Haaland's done absolutely nothing on game week 5. And then Palmer's obviously gone on to absolutely smash it out of the park. And that was something I wasn't really expecting from his first few weeks. If you watched the way that Chelsea played, he was kind of taking a little bit more of a wider position and wasn't too involved in kind of the build-up and stuff like that. And then watching the game against Forest as well, for large parts of that game, again, felt quite isolated and didn't really seem to be getting himself too involved. Obviously, then the red card happens and then the game completely changes and he starts to create opportunities. But again, looking at some of those teams, they are going to be well set up. And I think they'll know Cole Palmer is the danger man and will just be looking to nullify him at all costs. The Newcastle and United ones are the ones that I do see him getting something out of. I think Newcastle have been questionable at times this season. They've not really kind of been predictable in terms of their defensive kind of numbers or the way that they set up. And certain teams have found, chances against them. But the United one, I think that probably should be a green, kind of in retrospect at the moment.
Yeah, definitely.
I think, the injuries that you've got at the moment at the back, Eric doesn't really know how to set that defensive side up. The only positive I probably would say for United fans is maybe he gets sacked.
I was going to say, I don't know that Eric will still be in charge for the United game. Let us know in the comments if you think Ten Hag will make it to the Chelsea game, but I don't know how to feel because I don't necessarily think suggesting bringing in a near 11 million asset against Liverpool away is a good thing to do in any season ever. But Palmer, no player's fixture proof, and I always say this, and I truly do mean that you still want to target fixtures, even for Haaland, for Salah, you do really want to. But if you look at his returns last season, it was against anyone and everyone. Like it wasn't, he did bully some of the smaller teams, but at the same time, he scored goals against all of the top teams as well. So I don't even necessarily think you can say like he's less likely to return in those tough games. So maybe that is by definition a fixture-proof player. Maybe he is the closest we've got to that. Maybe even more so than Haaland, because we actually know Haaland does struggle against the bigger teams. And when I watched the highlights from Game Week 7, incredible double save from Sells to keep him out. Yeah. He hit the woodwork as well. If Palmer had got a goal in that game and comes away with another goal and an assist, 12-pointer or something like that, I think we're all of a sudden going, he is essential. Get him in now. But because he didn't get a goal and he only got the single assist, I wonder if there is some element of outcome bias here of he's only got a single assist. See, this is what happens in the slightly trickier games. And maybe we're not expecting as much now because I think he continues to return. So I guess what I'm saying is if you've got a good route to him, I'd maybe do it now. And I just think he's just going to continue going up in price. He's such a trend at the moment, not just in FPL, but football. Everyone's talking about him. Everyone wants him. Whether you're a casual manager or an engaged manager, everyone's talking about getting Cole Palmer into their team. I could see him being 11 million by the time you want him in game week 12. And the reason everyone is talking about having him regardless, if we look at the game week 12 fixtures, it's just from then on, he's brilliant. And I would argue he's the best captaincy option in 12 and maybe 13. Yeah. So in game week 12, he has Leicester. Salah has Southampton. So I do think if you've got Salah, that's definitely a discussion. Now, 13, he plays Villa at home.
Okay.
And so that doesn't stand out as a captaincy option. But if we switch to game week 13, I don't see a single standout captaincy option other than maybe Brian Mbeumo, which sounds crazy, but he's got Leicester at home because Man United play against Everton. You could argue if Man United have a new manager by then, Bruno becomes an option, but most people won't want to go there. Spurs play against Fulham at home, so maybe go for a Solanke or Son. I'm still not sure that I feel fully comfortable captaining a Spurs player at the moment, and Fulham have been okay defensively. Mm-hmm. Liverpool play against City, so I'm not necessarily sure you'd want to captain Salah or Haaland there. Arsenal have West Ham away. Could be an okay fixture, but are you comfortable captaining Saka against West Ham away? Maybe less so. So Villa at home, if you want to captain a premium, it might be Palmer again, which sounds strange, I know, or you go for a Brian Mbeumo against Leicester. Look through the Game Week 13 fixtures, by the way, guys, and let me know who you're looking at captaining. And then he obviously then goes into Game Week 14 against Southampton away. I definitely think there is a world in which I captain Palmer 3 game weeks in a row there. So I definitely think that around game week 12, you probably want a route to Palmer.
Yeah.
It's just about whether you feel like you can get away with the next 4. I feel like for someone like you, with Haaland, Saka and Salah, I think you can.
Oh, easy. Yeah.
I think you're fine. But I think for people that don't even have a third premium and they're looking at Trent in their team and it's like, do I transition now? I would be very tempted. Just to further more Palmer propaganda here, he's had the most big chance involvements this season with 16. 7 big chances himself and 9 big chances created. So it's not just that his numbers are made up through loads of little chances like we spoke about with Trent. 16 big chance involvements is a joke. And I say only 6 of those were in the game you got the 25 pointer. So there's still 10 outside of that. So the man is just involved in everything. The only person that gets close to that is Saka with 15 big chances involved, but only 3 of those are for himself. So I like the fact that with Palmer, he's creating and he's getting goals. Saka did go off injured for England, but the latest news that we've got, we're recording this on Monday, is that it looks like he's probably going to be fine. Just very briefly, if there are doubts around Saka, or maybe if not, is there any justification for you to do Saka to Palmer right now, or maybe even next week? Or do you think, again, Saka's a play that you'd want to hold through?
I think if I was looking at Cole Palmer, for my team personally, it is going to be Saka.
And is there any temptation for you to do that?
There is a temptation this week, to be honest.
Okay.
I think Bournemouth away is not the easiest fixture on paper. Bournemouth actually have probably been one of the most improved teams this season. I thought as soon as Dominic Solanke went, I thought they'd drop off, but Iriola's done a fantastic job. They've got a really good defensive structure. The way that they play is really exciting and interesting to watch as well. So I think that might be a little bit more of a difficult fixture. Yep. And again, we're not going to get anything from Arteta because we never do. He's going to be, he'll, we'll have to wait and see. But from all signs of it, it does look like he's going to be fine. So it could be worth holding on for one more week. But like you said, if Palmer pops off in this Liverpool game, you're probably talking a 0.2, 0.3 million price rise. If you've got to find that extra money somewhere else, it's going to start to cause a few headaches.
I think something we don't talk about enough as content creators is enjoying the game. And if not even if you're a Chelsea fan necessarily, but if you just would enjoy the game more having Palmer, because I know how horrible it is, we know from Haaland, like if you don't own a highly owned asset that is just in such a nice run of form and performing so well, maybe it's not optimal to bring in Palmer now. But if you enjoy your weekend more and you look at your team and you're happy with it, take a -4, take a -8, because enjoying the game for me is at the forefront of everything we do.
Yeah.
And if having a 3 premium structure with Saka, Palmer and Haaland would make you enjoy the game more, then just go for it. And that was kind of how I felt on my wild card. Palmer was not a player that I wanted to continue not owning every week because I felt pain with that 25 point. Like, I don't want to feel that again. So it's a bit knee-jerk, but the man's performing incredibly well. And I do think he was very unfortunate, even though the 10 men as well, not to come away with more than just the single assist in game week 7. Cool. So that's that on sort of Palmer, Trent. I know that's a key. Lots of people are looking at Trent in their team now and saying, do you sell Trent to bring in Palmer? I think Tom's saying maybe try and wait a week if you can.
Yeah.
I'm saying I kind of do agree, but if you enjoy the game more by bringing Palmer in, maybe just get it done this week. Another team that are having a lot of discussions around them is actually Spurs. So they've just been really good this season, I think, in general. I've been very impressed. Apart from that first half in game week 1 against Leicester, since then, most games, even against Arsenal, I've been very impressed with Spurs. And they've actually still got 4 really good fixtures in a row, 3 of which are at home. So they're going to West Ham, Palace, Villa, Ipswich. Do you own any Spurs assets in your team?
I don't own any Spurs assets.
Okay, so I'll ask you then, as someone, so 3 home games in the next 4, including West Ham, Villa and Ipswich. Are you looking at Spurs assets? And if so, who is it that's kind of standing out to you at the moment?
Yeah, for me, it was Brennan Johnson, but I've kind of cooled my interest a little bit. But he was going to be my Kevin Schade replacement. So drop Robertson down to a Lewis or an Ait-Nouri, upgrade Schade to a Brennan Johnson because he's been fantastic so far this season. And so is Spurs going forward. I think they're leading the way for expected goals. Yep. Probably a little bit unfortunate not to have picked up more points so far this season. They're probably doing what Spurs do all the time, bottling games, being very Spursy. But that run is pretty good. And looking at it for somebody that doesn't have any Spurs assets, I'm thinking I've got to get at least one in there.
Yeah, Brennan Johnson on him. He's had 21 shots this season, which isn't that many, 21 shots. All 21 have been inside the box. So he's not taking shots from 40 yards out and accumulating XG that way. And this is something I've tried doing this season is when I'm looking at expected goals and expected assists, I'm not just looking at the number, I'm looking at how has that been formulated. Because whilst it is still the same total XG number, I'd much rather it be fewer chances but in good position. So not taking lots of shots, but when he is, he's getting them in good opportunities. And I think Brennan Johnson, more than anyone I've ever seen, similar to like Marcus Rashford, he's a very confidence player. When he's not in a good run of form, he looks awful. Like, I've looked at him sometimes like, how you're a footballer. And then when he's in a good run, I'm like, you're one of the best wingers in the Premier League. So he's clearly in that hot run now. How long that lasts, I don't know. If he has a really poor game against West Ham, I wouldn't be surprised if that's it for a few games for him with respect to attacking returns. But he seems to be really trusted by Postecoglou at the moment. And Postecoglou's not really rotating that kind of front four. Once Sonny's back, that Son, Solanke, Kulusevski, Johnson, it's so strong. So I still feel like Johnson is a really good pickup for the next 4. In terms of fixtures beyond that moving forward, they're not great for Spurs, but I was kind of of the opinion like you've got to sell them because it's that City game in 12 that you look at and you're like, if I've got triple Spurs there, it doesn't feel great. But then after that, it's Fulham, Bournemouth, Chelsea, Southampton. So I think you could conceivably keep your Spurs assets through that period. Then it's Liverpool in 17, but then it's Forest, Wolves, Newcastle. So maybe you could get away with, if you have other issues, to maybe keep your Spurs assets long term. So if you were thinking, I do want a Spurs player, but I don't have to use a transfer to bring him in and then to take him out, I actually think you could conceivably keep them a little bit longer term. So I really don't mind this still as an entry point, especially West Ham at home. Feels like a very good fixture for the Spurs assets. I did get quite a few questions around Solanke, and I've seen lots of narratives online that he's, like I said, distracting defenders. Yeah. And if you do watch the game, they're not finding him as much as you would want. He generally is dropping a little bit deeper. I would say similar to Kane, but he's not got the passing ability of Kane, but kind of dropping in, and it's the likes of Son, Werner, Johnson, even Kulusevski at points getting beyond Solanke. There are people saying that Johnson doesn't want to pass to Solanke. I'm not seeing any of that, but they're definitely struggling to find him the amount you would want. And he had 0 shots against Brighton in a game that was very open. To have 0 shots and obviously therefore 0 XG, it's a little bit worrying. But I just want to say don't knee-jerk too much, because in the 2 games before that, game 5 and 6, he accumulated 7 big chances in 2 weeks, which was more than Cole Palmer in the period he got that 25-pointer. Yeah. So you can't say he's not getting chances because he's had 7 big ones in the last 2 before that. But if longer term he starts to struggle, then he absolutely is going to be an issue because he's too expensive. When you look at like Johnson, Kulusevski, if you can get a route into that Spurs attack for that much cheaper, and then we're going to look at the likes of João Pedro moving forward in the attack, it's like 7.7 million I think he is now. You can't pay that for a player that's only getting assists. No,
you can't. And I think watching those game week 5 and 6, I was like, I've got to get him in. I've got to find a way to get him in. I've got to kind of fiddle around with the team structure, try and get him in. Obviously, that Brighton performance then made me reconsider things. But again, like you said, at that 7.6 or 7.7 now price point, it does make it extremely difficult to kind of find a way to get him in. And if he isn't, delivering in terms of those attacking returns, we are going to be looking at it going, well, I'd much rather have a free premium structure, or I'd rather have Trent if he does exceptionally well, if Liverpool continue to look good at the back. You're going, well, do I find a way to get him in, or do I maybe just manoeuvre around and get somebody like a Brennan Johnson, who is at that 6.6 million price tag, a lot more affordable. There's a lot more, I would say, pivot options as well off Brennan Johnson when they do have that City game as well. You could drop him down to a 4.5 and use the money elsewhere. Obviously, as well, there's kind of a good host of 5 to 5.5 million players as well cropping up that will have decent fixtures as well around that swing in game week 12. I think it's Bournemouth have a really, really good swing. So I'd be looking at, people like Semenyo or Tavernier who've started the season exceptionally well. And I think Bournemouth as well, I think are the third for shots out of all teams so far this season. So they look really, really good. So I think if I was to pick between Solanke or Johnson, I would be going for Johnson because I've got that way out of him. If obviously, like we said, this purple patch ends and he doesn't continue to do well. I think it's now 7 and 7. I think the other problem we're going to see with him is the players coming back from injury. Yeah. I think it's Aubert.
Odegaard.
Yeah, there we go. They've also got Richarlison coming back, Son coming back, Kulusevski, Werner. There's so many players there. European football as well. They've got Europa League. Brennan Johnson will start to, I think, see reduced minutes when all these players are back, or potentially see some games where he doesn't play. You'd hope that would be in the Europa League where they're playing lesser opponents, but I think for me, I would be looking at a Brennan Johnson rather than a Dominic Solanke. I think there's so many better exit strategies around that game week 12 fixture rather than Dominic Solanke for me.
I would agree with that. There's like, if you own Solanke, it's not an issue, but I definitely think like a new Johnson's the one. But I agree fully with what you're saying there. Even in a period where there wasn't much competition because players were injured, he got 67, 69, 75, 90 against Brighton when they were chasing. But with Odegaard back, with Richarlison, with Son, with Werner who could play out there, like he's not getting 90 minutes on a regular basis anyway. He could conceivably be benched in a game, but I think what is more likely is the early subs continue.
Yeah.
And so we can look at his XG per 90 being really good, and he has been scoring goals, but you want players on the pitch. The most chances in the Premier League is always in that final 10 to 15 minutes of games. So I don't think if you have no Spurs now, you need to break your team and go out there and sell good players to bring them in. But I equally think if right now you have a slot free in the attack around the Solanke price or the midfield around the Johnson-Kulusevski price, I certainly don't mind it. Just very briefly on Maddison, numbers have been extremely impressive this season. Better than Johnson, better than Kulusevski, almost as good as Solanke in total. I just don't really like where he's playing. So if you watch Spurs, what they're essentially doing is Kulusevski is playing as a 10, but on the right-hand side of the pitch. And Maddison's playing as more like an 8 or a 6, but more on the left-hand side. So Maddison still has that license in that channel to get into the number 10 role, get onto the edge of the box and create and score goals. But he's playing so much deeper than where he did for Leicester or where he did last season for Spurs. And so I'm trying to incorporate more eye test into my play this season rather than just relying on numbers. And if I watch Spurs, he's far, far, far too deep for me. Like he's even deeper than like Pedro Porro at points. So do you think there is a world in which Maddison's worth the extra if you look at his numbers and his consistency? Or is it always more of a Johnson for you?
It's such an interesting one because Maddison started the season so well, like he did last season as well. Before he got that injury, he was phenomenal, unplayable. And I feel when James Maddison, again, feels very much like a confidence player. When the mood is right, he is unstoppable. One of the best players in the Premier League. It's interesting that you've noted that position change, and that has maybe slightly cooled my interest on him, to be honest. Before, I was probably saying to people that I think Diaz replacements and Mbeumo would be number 1, Maddison number 2 for this fixture run. I just think it's so good. Yep. It might be worth taking a gamble on it. And it is only a 4-game week period. And if that position, he is dropping a little bit deeper, not creating opportunities, then at that point you can obviously switch him out for a different player. Maybe Diaz is back on the menu at that point. You never know. But yeah, it's interesting, that position. It's something we're going to have to monitor how that plays out with different teams as well. Maybe against better opposition, he might even be even further back, or he could be playing a more freer role. Again, I think it's obviously game dependent, and it's going to be one to monitor going forward. Yeah,
I think it's basically Kulusevski's just been so impressive in that central role. Coming, like, obviously most of his career, especially at Spurs, played on the right, but he's playing in that number 10, and Maddison is just trusted to do a little bit more defensive work, and Kulusevski's just not. As much as he is a fantastic runner, he's not a defensive-minded player. So I think Kulusevski's been so good in that 10 that Postecoglou's just said, can you just drop a little bit deeper, especially as they don't have multiple sort of defensive midfielders that they can play. So yeah, let's see with all of the players returning. But just to recap on Spurs, I think all of them are fine assets to bring. If you tell me bringing in Solanke, Maddison or Johnson this week, absolutely great. And even Pedro Porro, by the way, exceptionally brilliant FPL asset. It's just, do you have 5.6, 5.7 million spare for a defender at this point? And are you probably not slightly more tempted to invest that into the attack? But definitely not a bad entry point for Spurs. And you haven't missed the boat. 4 really good fixtures coming up. So another talking point, that absolute fraud Erling Haaland, because he's basically just, I don't know, just an expensive £4.5 million forward at the moment. He's getting us just back-to-back blanks.
Yep.
So here is some anti-Haaland propaganda before we discuss more seriously that he is still a fantastic asset to own. In Game Week 6 and Game Week 7, Haaland is at 19th for non-penalty expected goals in the league. Players like Altara Dango, Soboslai, and Timo Werner are all ahead of him. And in fact, Nkunku has more non-penalty expected goals despite playing 20 minutes, whereas Erling Haaland's at 180. So Nkunku has more goal threat than Haaland with 160 less minutes. He's actually had 0 big chances across the last 2 weeks as well, Erling Haaland. So by all accounts, not just unlucky not to return, stinking it up.
Yeah.
And this is what Andy Martin, FPL Tactician on Twitter, if you're on Twitter, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, talks about, is you can't afford for him to blank. No. Even for 1 week. That's a disaster when you're spending that much of the budget. You need him returning basically every week, especially when you're captaining him, because you're not only losing all of that budget, you're losing your captaincy option on someone else. Yeah. And people that didn't have Haaland, rightfully so, went for Saka, and they're laughing because not only have they not spent all that money on Haaland, but they've captained someone else. So we can't afford for him to keep blanking. People are pointing to Rodri being out. Rodri only played 45 minutes against Brentford and then 20 minutes against Arsenal. So Rodri hasn't been there all season when Haaland was twatting in hat-tricks for fun. So we can't just point to Rodri and say that it's Rodri. I actually wonder if the bigger loss is KDB. But either way, in the last couple of games, they're not really feeding Haaland. How do you feel about Erling Haaland moving forward? Is he a potential sell like this week, next week, the week after? Like, are you looking at him in your team and thinking could spend that money elsewhere?
Well, I think probably, to be honest, I've been burnt earlier this season, so I'm going to keep him for the next two because I still feel he is the best captaincy option. And that is kind of always the plan that I'm looking at with my team, always every single week to have the best captaincy option because it's such a useful thing and it can literally change your rank if you get the right captain. People that went Saka this week flew up the ranks.
Exactly. Yeah.
I definitely think as well there is going to be scope at points this season to go without Erling Haaland. That's what I tried to do at the start.
That's what we thought would happen in Game Week 1. Yeah.
I looked at it and I went, looking at that, you're probably only going to want to captain him maybe in the Ipswich game. Outside of that, I reckon Salah covers him off. And he did a decent job for the first few weeks, but unfortunately, I got some of the other alternative picks that I needed to kind of do well during that period to deliver. But like you said, if he keeps blanking for 15.4 million, we have to start looking at other ways of playing the game and other structures, not just kind of following this narrative and thinking Haaland is the best option because he is a robot, he will continue to score. There's going to be people like Palmer, Saka, Salah, Son when he's back fit as well with this good Spurs fixture run that maybe you go, okay, there might be a way to kind of navigate around Haaland and just hope that he gets one goal or continues to blank like he does. I think as well, for the past two seasons, he's had, I think it's 7 games where he's not had a big chance in any of them. He's already had 2 so far this season, back to back. And like you alluded to there, KDB, I think for me, is the big impact from just a football side because he's a wonderful player, isn't he? He's so creative. If you look just at his data from last season where he played such short minutes, I think it was 18 games, picking up 14 goal involvements. This season is very similar, 4 games, 2 goal involvements. He is the heart of that creativity. And there's nobody else as well that has the on-field ability to pick a pass. It's like watching a quarterback, I'd say, at times, because he can just pick a pass, completely carve open defenses. So obviously that's going to be a massive impact. The other thing is kind of more a mental side to Haaland. And I think this is not being actually spoken about by anyone, is if you look at what's happened to him in the past month. So over the past few weeks, it's been announced that he's expecting his first child. And being a dad or finding out you're going to be a dad is one of the biggest kind of stressful things. By the way, if my parents are watching, I'm not like expecting a child, and that's why I know. But like it has such a massive impact. Then, of course, losing a close family friend, his emotions over the past few weeks have probably been a roller coaster. And it's going to mentally drain people. And I think sometimes we look at FPL players and we just see them as numbers. We don't see that there's actually a human behind them that has to deliver. And just like us, it has its faults, it has its off days, it has experiences in life that impact its actual on-field performance as well. And I think that could be one of the main, not the main, I feel the KDB thing has more impact, but I feel it's probably one of those additional factors that's going to be, impacting his blanks.
Yeah, the level of concentration. If you've not watched Haaland off the ball, people just assume he's like a tap-in merchant.
Yeah.
That man is hyper-focused for every second of a game to find those chances and to be in the right position. And I almost feel like you can't maintain that across the entire season. He started so hot that with the stuff going on and with just not being, again, an actual robot, he's not going to maintain that every game. You could call it regression to the mean, you could call it variance, whatever you want to call it. He was never going to continue at that rate. And I just don't think just because he's blanked in a couple of games, he's all of a sudden a terrible asset that we now need to sell. On KDB, I don't even think KDB needs to be the one finding Haaland. Just him being on the pitch changes the way that teams approach them. Yeah. Like you all of a sudden have to put at least one player on KDB. You can't give KDB freedom. That then frees up other space for other players. And even Phil Foden combined for a lot of goals with Haaland last season. And again, him himself being on the pitch, you can't not man-mark Phil Foden on his day. And even now Foden's come back, he's not really found that form. So whenever KDB's back and when Foden starts to find his feet, that might be more of the point when you're looking at Haaland and saying like he's really a must-own right now. So listen, I'm never going to say you can't go without a player. And so I'm going to now say don't go without him. No, I just think, like for me, I think the key thing to take from what you just said there was around captaincy.
Yeah.
And I think if you ever think a player is the best captain in FPL, selling them is not really an option. Going without should ideally not. And I look at Game Week 8, right, this week. I just don't see who you're captaining instead. Liverpool and Chelsea play against each other. So for me, Salah against Chelsea, he's done quite well in the past. You could go there. Palmer could do, but I wouldn't captain either of those.
Yeah.
Such an unpredictable game, that kind of thing. Arsenal against Bournemouth away. We've already spoke about the vitality. It's not an easy place to go to. And Bournemouth's defensive data has been okay. Outside of that, you could captain a Spurs asset against West Ham if Son's fit, but we don't know. Solanke, I don't know. We trust him. Brennan Johnson's not captaincy material for me. I really don't know who you captain here. Brian Mbeumo against Man United genuinely could be okay. Maybe Leif Davis, the best defender we've ever seen in the Premier League. But I mean, there really isn't an alternative captain for me. Obviously, is. If you don't have Haaland, you've got to look elsewhere. But he's just such a standout. I mean, Wolves have just conceded 5 to Brentford. So there's that. And then in 9, there are other options you could go for potentially. But again, Arsenal play against Liverpool. So that rules out really Saka and Salah for me.
Yep.
You've got Chelsea against Newcastle at home. You could go Palmer, and I don't mind that. But then it's Southampton at home for Haaland. Like, I just don't see the next 2. But then after that, City go on to 3 slightly more tricky games, which is Bournemouth away, Brighton away, Spurs at home, then Liverpool away. At that point, I definitely think you could look to maybe even pivot to a Salah, who's got Brighton at home, Villa at home, Southampton away. It's a nicer run. And that's the point where I'm like, I don't think any of those weeks you have to captain Haaland. And you don't have to in the next 2. I just think captaincy is such a big thing for me that I just don't see myself going without for the next 2. So are we both of the opinion that around game week 10 we'll reconsider this chat and maybe look to sell Haaland after that?
Yeah, I think that's probably going to be the period. I think as well, if you look at City as an attack as a whole, have struggled the last 2 games. I think it's the first time they've ever lost back-to-back games on XG.
Oh, wow. Didn't know that.
Under Pep Guardiola. So I think he's going to have spent this whole international break probably locked in a room trying to find a way to win it, because he is a madman, really. He loves football. He loves finding ways to win games. And I think he'll be looking at the last 2 going, we've lost those on XG. That's never happened in my tenure. Yeah. We've got to find a way to sort this.
One of the most adaptive managers in the Premier League and in the world. Like, for everything you can say about Pep, he's gifted good squads. He has the money to spend. Yes. But very adaptive. In-game, out of games. Even this season, he's changed up where he's got Doku and Savio holding the width.
Yeah.
And he's got Rico Lewis playing a new role that we've not seen in like a diamond midfield. Like, the man season upon season finds ways. And this is a spell where we often see City go on a really nice run now. They actually normally start the season quite badly.
Yeah.
And then going closer to Christmas, they seem to keep everyone fully fit and just go on an insane run. So yeah, I could definitely see them doing well coming up. So for me, give it 2 weeks. Then in game week 10, we'll discuss potentially selling Erling Haaland. So the only final other topic we want to discuss is kind of this game week 12 fixture swing. Maybe you should have discussed it at the start of the pod, to be honest, because we kept on referring to it. But this is basically, I think, the next big time that there is a notable fixture swing for quite a few teams. And there's also an international break between game week 11 and 12 too. So there were a few questions around the best time to wildcard now. And I think if you're not going this week, post-international break, game week 12 is probably the best. But yeah, there's essentially a big fixture swing, especially for teams that maybe we do own some assets from and that we don't necessarily own some assets from that we want to bring in. So if you're watching on YouTube, it might be a little bit small, but you'll have all of the fixtures from game week 12 to 15 for all of the teams. But just for those on audio, really the teams that stand out to me that have pretty good fixtures from game week 12 onwards are Arsenal, who have Forest, West Ham, United and Fulham in 4, which is pretty good. Then Chelsea, and again, if you don't have a Cole Palmer, this is again the point to jump on. They've got Leicester, Villa, Southampton and Spurs, which as a 4 is not bad at all. Villa, again, if you've not got a Rodgers, maybe you can go without for the next few, or an Ollie Watkins. Maybe we pivot away from Haaland and bring in an Ollie Watkins in that position. He's got Palace, Chelsea, Brentford, Southampton, 3 of those being at home, which is a really nice run. Bournemouth, you already spoke about going to that really nice run there. They've got Brighton, Wolves, Spurs and Ipswich, which again is really nice. A lot of these have home fixtures as well. And then Wolves is the other one, which we've spoken about a little bit. I've got Cunha and Ait-Nouri, but they've got Fulham, Bournemouth, Everton, West Ham. They've actually got okay fixtures from 10, but if you can't get on them in 10, again, game week 12 feels very nice. So those are the things that stand out to me in terms of the players that are switching around. How are you prepping, like as an FPL manager? How do you prep for an upcoming fixture swing? Because I'm telling people this going into game week 8 and they're like, what am I supposed to do with that information? Like, what are you expected to do to prep? Or are you not? Are you just considering game week 8 to like 9, 10 right now?
I think there's 2 ways to kind of look at it. What I do is I kind of keep in my phone, I've got like notes of players when I'm watching match of the day. I'm like, okay, he looks pretty decent. Kind of keeping track of certain players' data as well during these fixtures for this good kind of swing coming up. But at the same time, circumstances can very easily change. You know, there might be Wolves, for example, they've been playing a lot of top quality sides, when they've got these lesser opponents where they can be a little bit more free and expansive, we might see completely different roles from players as well. So I think it's important to keep note of the players and kind of monitor their data and stuff like that, but it's not the be all and end all, because certain teams will set up in different ways, kind of dependent on opponent and stuff like that.
I really like that point. I think that's something that I sometimes forget to do as a manager, is take into account context. Like that Brighton game was Cole Palmer's perfection. Like if he could have created an exact game of how he could do well, is that formation, structure, tactics from Brighton. That's not going to happen in every game.
Nope.
And so I think being flexible, you watched the podcast last week with Simon where we talked about like Semmelweis reflex and plan continuation bias. And if you've not watched that podcast, by the way, or listened to it, I did one with Simon March, former FPL winner, last week, where we spoke about some of the psychology behind FPL. And we as humans get really stubbornly fixated on a plan, and we call it booking in transfers.
Yeah.
I really don't like booking in transfers. So I don't like saying, I will be bringing in this player in this week. As you can see by the way I'm talking, I'm like, Haaland might be able to sell, or you might be able to bring this in here, because we don't know.
No.
Like if Palmer goes in and scores 4 goals this week, everyone and their mum and nan, they're bringing them in, Cole Palmer in next week. Whereas if he goes and blanks and looks really poor against a more difficult opposition, then it changes. So yeah, I just think, consider game week 12. It is important to think about. And there are 2 ways that you can look at this. You can say, right, I need to start making transfers for this fixture swing in game week 12 because I don't want to fall behind.
Yep.
You could save transfers for 12 and try and go into game week 12 with like 4 or 5 free transfers. And then you can basically play a mini wildcard. Or you say, actually, I'm going to attack game weeks 8 to 11, which I really don't mind, because myself and a lot of other more patient managers, we're going to start thinking, right, game week 12 is going around. Even with my wildcard, I went for 8 Nuri and Cunha, knowing that really when I wanted them was from sort of 11, 12 onwards. Same with Leif Davis. I liked his long-term fixtures. Like I had to sacrifice a little bit in the short term, thinking about the long term. And that can be at our own detriment sometimes. And actually, sometimes the best way to play it is to go hyper aggressive. If anyone watches the FPL Wire, Prenil late rise, he's often trying to find those little pockets and ways to attack and be aggressive, whilst other people are so focused on the long term. So I'm not sitting there and saying only look at game week 12 onwards now. I just don't want you to be surprised when it swings around and go, hang on a second, my team looks really bad now from game week 12 onwards. And if you do have your wild card, I'd absolutely be considering playing it then. Is there any other weeks that you've looked at for wildcard, or is it just 12 for you?
I think 12. I think once we get past 12, you start to enter that Christmas period, and we've kind of already alluded to it. And I think as well, I think there's a Carabao Cup round in there. There's 2 Champions League rounds. So some teams are probably going to play 10 games in probably a 5 to 6 game week spell on FPL. It's like...
Yeah, so that might be a nice point to play it if not. So like between like game, I think the last week you can play is 19.
Yeah.
So between like game week 17 and 19, maybe even slightly early, like 16, to prep you for that busy period. So if you do have like a Jota in your team and you've got like defensive risk, like Rico Lewis at that point might be a player like going into this busy period, I don't want to risk it.
Yeah.
Maybe you do load up on 90-minute penalty taking talisman, Eze, Solanke, and Burmo, Bruno Fernandes, believe it or not. You might go into that run of just thinking, do you know what, these are some players that I want to invest in more. So yeah, I think if you're not playing it this week, and by the way, this week is fine to play it, then 12, then like 16, 17, 18 would probably be the advice. But yeah, I just didn't want you to be surprised. We'll discuss game week 12 in the future, but I know when I used to play a little bit more casually, I'd just be looking at my team one week and go, how did it get that bad that quickly?
Yeah.
Cool. Right. This is the point when I turn my laptop away from you slightly. So I've got some quick fire questions for you. I've got 6 quick fire questions for you. You don't have to answer them in one word, but just 5 to 10 seconds maximum. If you want to give a little bit of justification, you can. And I will put you massively on the spot with some pretty difficult questions. Are you ready?
Yeah, let's go for it.
Okay, cool. Saka or Palmer if you could only own one from game week 8 to 11?
I'd have Palmer.
At the 5.5 million to 6 million price tag, would you rather own Porro or Gvardiol?
I think I'd go Porro because I feel Lewis can cover off Gvardiol.
Very nice. Favourite cheap defender below the price of 5 million?
Probably would be 8 Nori.
8 Nuri.
Yeah.
Is Haaland essential for the next 2 weeks?
I think he is, just because of the captaincy appeal for me.
Maddison or Johnson taken into account price?
Probably go Johnson.
And favourite cheap forward to buy right now below the price of 6.5 million?
I'm going to go Raul Jimenez.
Raul Jimenez. I like that one a lot. Very nice. Raul Jimenez is the bane of my life because I had Maniz for the Maniz for the easy fixtures. He's blank. Jimenez comes in and just starts scoring goals for fun. But what a striker, by the way. What a player. Cool. So the next section is a little fun thing that we do on this channel, which is basically get our guests to get involved with Club. So Club have obviously very kindly sponsored this podcast. And what it basically is free to play fantasy football mobile game. And you can actually start your Club journey now, depending where you're watching this. Either click the link in the video, in the description, or in my bio, depending where you're watching it. Yeah, you can see it on your screen right now. It is absolutely class. It kind of combines everything you'd want from like FPL, Football Manager, FIFA, all put together. And if I just switch to show you my squad, this is my squad at the moment. So I've got Welbeck and Jackson up front, which is really, really nice. A solid midfield. It's an okay defence. I am slowly building it more and more. But what we're going to ask you today is try and compete with the previous guests. So each week we ask a guest to meet with our agent, which is Manny, and basically try and pull the best player that they possibly can. Our first guest, Fran, managed to pull 79 rated Sofal. Then I managed to pull 79 rated Hutchinson. Chai managed to pull 80 rated Gusto. So Chai is currently in the lead. So all you need to do is pull an 80 rated player to go tie in the lead, or an 81 plus to try and beat him, but preferably pull also a player that I would want in my fantasy football team as well, so that I can hopefully get the most points and start to win some pretty decent prizes. So I'm going to hand the phone to you. All I need you to do is click meet now and let me know who the player is that you get.
Oh, okay.
Is it good?
That's very good. I'd be happy with that.
Okay, who is it?
It's Emil Smith-Rowe.
Emil Smith-Rowe. Oh, also an 80 rated player. So Emil Smith-Rowe, I kind of feel like I'm going to put you first on the leaderboard because he's the same rated as Gusto, but probably a more usable player.
Yeah.
That's very nice. Going into a nice fixture run we spoke about with Fulham as well.
Yeah.
Awesome. So like I said, if you want to start your club journey now, there'll be a link in the video description or bio, depending where you're watching this. Do check it out. I highly recommend it. This is something I've been playing for over 9 months, almost 10 months now. And I can't wait for you guys to see it. So yeah, check them out. And a massive shout out to Club as well for continuing to support the podcast. So now that you've pulled me an absolutely fantastic player, we can now move on to another fun game we play, which is the prediction game for FPL Therapy. So in a very similar way, each week we get the guests to predict 3 players rated 10%, owned by 10% or fewer managers in the game that they think will do well for the upcoming week. So basically your top 3 differentials. In terms of the leaderboard thus far, we've almost filled it out. So we've had 8 guests, including a little cheeky guess from me. And at the moment, Praz is at the top with 20, Pricey in second with 16, and FPL Chai with 15. Last week, we had Chai, and he guessed Foden, Trossard, and Bowen. Foden had a stinker. Trossard didn't start, but Bowen got the big 12-pointer, which has put him inside the top 3. So this is all you need, is the one player to do very well. We've spoken about all 3 of your players, but I actually really like them. I wasn't expecting these 3. So we'll start with the first player.
Yep.
And that is 5.2% owned James Maddison. Now, we've said that maybe Brennan Johnson might be your favoured pick longer term, but do you feel like this is a fixture where Maddison could have some joy?
I really do. I think West Ham, especially in that Chelsea game, the amount of space and time they gave central players was ridiculous. It wasn't, I think it was the second Jackson goal. It was just a basic triangle.
Just a hole in the middle of their pitch, isn't there? Yeah.
And I think a player like Maddison is going to just thrive off that. Putting Solanke in, he's got the wide runners as well. I think it could be a little bit of a feast session, to be honest.
Yeah, I really like that. This is a week where this is one of the few fixtures over the next that I'd actually like more Spurs players. Like I've got Solanke, but I'd like to add Maddison or Johnson. Cool. Right, the second one you've literally just mentioned, and I love this as well because it's not on paper like a perfect fixture. It's not a green fixture. Raul Jimenez against Aston Villa.
Yeah.
Do you fancy him to do well here, especially if Concer's out, maybe?
Yeah. The thing is with Aston Villa, I feel the last 2 games before the international break, they looked a little bit leggy.
Okay.
The Bayern game, they were great.
Yep.
And I said this in my deadline stream. I was like, I think there will be a drop-off for that United fixture. They've gone from such a high where they've just beat Bayern Munich at home.
Yep.
Everybody's going to be buzzing. We're playing United next week. Not that, United...
Get off the podcast. Yeah. No, but it's hard to maintain that level of like motivation and like commitment to it. I agree.
And I think with the injuries that they've got, and Raul as a player as well, it's so good to see him back because I thought after the head injury, it didn't really seem to see like he wanted to play anymore. There wasn't that confidence to go for kind of duels and stuff like that. But it seems like he's got his confidence back. It was the other week where he did like a little flick.
Oh, that back heel for the goal against City. That was.
And I was just like, that's Raul of old. He's back. So some good fixtures coming up, and I think he could do well this week as well.
I rate it. Villa they were slightly better this season, but I think again, dependent upon injuries and other things, they're certainly not a defence that you think will keep many clean sheets.
Yeah.
And they've shown that so far this season, apart from against Bayern Munich. They've not really kept many clean sheets. Cool. And then the third and final one, I'll let you take this one away because I just want to hear it from someone else. Who's the third best player in the Premier League? No, I'm joking. Who's your third differential for this week?
It's going to be Leif Davis.
Yeah.
I think that's a great fixture for him against Everton. The way that they'll set up, away from home especially, they'll be sat in a low block. I feel he's going to get a lot of time and space on the ball. I feel, he's probably going to get quite a few corners and free kicks. And I feel that is where he's going to start to accumulate some good data. And hopefully for your team, some attacking returns to go with
the
that.
Leif Davis train starts now. I love the man. I just love watching him. Like, as much as the data's good, it's just like I say, on every set piece, basically, in swinging, out swinging, free kicks, corners. He's got to get another attacking returns. He had 21, I think, in the Championship last season, attacking returns. Absolute joke. So fingers crossed you are correct, because I'd like to see you top the leaderboard, but I'd also like to see my team get some points. Cool. So the only final thing then is just to discuss our teams for Game Week 8 and how we're feeling moving forward. So I'll read out Tom's team for those on audio, but if you're watching on YouTube right now, it'll be on your screen. So in net, Raya, a back line of Mikalenko, who's currently flagged against Ipswich, Robertson against Chelsea, and Ola Aina against Crystal Palace. Then a midfield of Mbeumo, Salah, Rodgers, and Saka, very solid midfield. And then a front line of Calvert-Lewin, Vardy, and Haaland. And obviously Calvert-Lewin's got Ipswich, Vardy's got Southampton. Yeah. So surely they'll deliver you some points this week. And then on your bench, at the moment, is Konsa, Greaves, and Sharda. You've got 3 free transfers, 0 in the bank.
Yep.
Talk us through how you're currently feeling, chances of you rolling, making a transfer, and where you're currently looking to go right now.
I feel quite high on the roll probability, to be honest. I think taking 4 into next week's
massive.
It's
you want to get to 5, don't you?
I do want to get to 5 because it's uncharted territory.
Yep.
And if you look at, again, a lot of like FPL reviews, like every single week, it's like roll.
They recommend you roll, yeah.
Yeah, because it's got like such a big advantage. And I do feel if I can get to 5, maybe if the team's still in decent order, maybe Palmer comes in and we keep it at 4. But yeah, I think I'm going to roll. But obviously there are a few flagged players in there that I'm potentially going to have to deal with. Konza and Mikalenko. I think if either one of those is out, we're probably going to be looking at maybe somebody like a Lewis or an 8 Nuri. But obviously then I'd have to play 8 Nuri against City. My other thought is potentially to drop Robertson down to a Lewis, free up some money from the back line, because I do feel like Liverpool's defensive numbers are going to drop off over this period. Also, Robbo being benched last week has kind of made me think, when there's back-to-back games with Champions League in the week, is he going to start them? I don't really want that headache. And then, the other player, obviously, I think we've spoke about is Cole Palmer and whether or not it's worth potentially getting him in, with Saka currently being flagged, but it looks like he's going to be fine. So I think I will stick with Saka for one more week and pivot to Cole Palmer. The final thing to obviously say is around the 2 forwards that have been disappointing, Calvert-Lewin and Jamie Vardy. Just real weird picks, to be honest, because the fixtures after this as well still look really good. And it's kind of this thing where I'm caught in two minds, where I'm looking at the fixtures going, surely you have to score against Southampton and Ipswich. Surely. Because then they've got difficult fixtures next week, and then after, again, I think they've got it reversed. So Calvert-Lewin's playing Southampton, Vardy's playing Ipswich, and it's like, surely. Yeah. But I'm getting to the point where it's like, do I just cut my losses and move to somebody who is actually scoring goals?
I think you're right to keep faith for a little bit longer. And they're both on penalties. You don't even, like, Ipswich could beat Everton 4-1. If the one is a penalty from Calvert-Lewin, you might get an 8 or 9 point. It was the same with Cunha last week. Like, Wolves got battered, but I got 9 points. Like, I think a 90-minute man on penalties is always a fine pick. I do think, like, in terms of your structure moving forward, I could imagine that you might want to get a little bit more money into, like, one of your forwards. Like, for example, Solanke, if he does start to do well, Jackson, Havertz, Watkins eventually, alongside a Haaland. They're very good, those two, but they're also very cheap. And I suppose that's because you've got Salah in there rather than someone like me that's got Palmer. Yeah. So there might be at some point a discussion of whether it's downgrading Salah or Haaland to just free up a little bit of funds to go into one of those 2 forward spots. So it's really Palmer for you is the one, and not this week, but in future weeks. So that's where you're starting to move towards. Yeah. I like it a lot. I like the Ola Aina picker as well. Lots of people have gone off Forest defence because they're not like a shiny new toy, but they're still defending so incredibly well. Palace at home, you could see a clean sheet there, absolutely. Yeah. Awesome. So my team, I've obviously just wildcarded, but of course, because you can carry free transfers through the wildcard, now I've got 2 free transfers, only 0.1 million in the bank. So my team is Raya in net, a back line of Lewis against Wolves, Gabriel against Bournemouth, and Davis against Everton. A midfield of Rodgers, Saka, Palmer, Mbeumo, and currently dibbling. So the same midfield as Tom, but I've got Palmer in there, and also, Dibbling. I'll discuss that in a second because I need your advice. And then Solanke and Haaland as my front two. And then the bench is currently Cunha, Vandenberg, and Ait-Nouri. Obviously, Cunha and Ait-Nouri are in there really from next week, but this week they've got City at home. Yep. So the real decision for me, because I don't think I need to make a transfer there, and this isn't being big-headed. Well, I guess it is a little bit. There's no players that I actually want that I don't own. Like, obviously, in an ideal world, I'd have Trent, but I'm not desperate to bring Trent in for Chelsea at home. So really, there's no one that I'm like, I really wish I could have them in my team. So it's just the benching headache. So I think the defence picks itself. It's really, I need to start two of Rodgers, Dibbling, and Cunha. So I need to bench one of them. Right now, I've got Cunha on the bench for two reasons. City's defensive data, even without Rodri this season, has been pretty good. And also, I have Lewis. Now, I don't think that should massively affect my thinking. But at the same time, I'm like, why not just go all in on the chance of a Lewis clean sheet attacking return? Because realistically, unless Lewis gets an attacking return, I'm not going to get something from both Cunha and Lewis. So I might as well just fully back that. With Rodgers, he's been so consistent. The minutes have been good. Fulham away is not a great fixture, though. So there's some temptation there. But I equally think, like, can I start Cunha against City ahead of Rodgers against Fulham? I don't know. And the other player is Dibbling. And it feels crazy starting Dibbling in my team. But this was the point of picking him, that he has a good fixture this week when Cunha doesn't. And Leicester at home, other than playing against Southampton, is about as good as you can get for a fixture. And he has been playing very, very well. So I feel like there's justification to start all of them, because if I just look at the players, Cunha is the best of the three. He's a 90-minute man on penalties, and he's got really good underlying data. So where would you stand? I'm going to take your advice and blame you if it goes wrong.
All right, okay.
Who would you bench from Rodgers, Dibbling, and Cunha?
I would probably start Cunha.
You would start Cunha?
Over Dibbling.
Over Dibbling, okay.
Just because I think Fulham have set up a blueprint on how to get to City's defensive line. Pace. Raul down the middle had a really, really good game as well. And I think, they have been conceding quite a few sloppy goals. It does just take one penalty as well to kind of skew that. But at the same time, on the other hand, Dibbling against a team where if Southampton have any chance of staying up this season, they've got to win that game. And you feel as well for like the manager as well. Surely if he loses that, his job's starting to look a little bit shaky. But I think with the penalty appeal, and the way that City have been playing recently in terms of losing the last two games on expected goals, I would be tempted to play Cunha. But it's one of those where I could see Dibbling getting something out of the game. I think Rodgers starts regardless. I think he's fine to pick.
Okay.
And the thing with Lewis, though, he could come off in like the 60th minute, and you could already get that clean sheet.
Yeah,
secured.
I guess there is a world. Early sub, clean sheet, and then Cunha scores. That's the dream, really, isn't it?
Yeah, that is the dream.
There is, and I know it shouldn't be, but I'm looking at ownership, and that's why I'm like, there's some part of me is wanting to bench Rodgers, because Dibbling is 2% of my rank, and Cunha's 0.7. Well, at least last week. And I'm looking at two players under 5% of my rank, whereas Rodgers was up like 30. So I just wonder if it's like very close between the three. Do I bench Rodgers and just hope he has an off day? And then I've got Dibbling and Cunha as, obviously they're both at home as well. Let us know in the comments, because it'll be probably my major decision this week, as boring as that is which two to start and who to bench. But other than that, yeah, I mean, where like, you can feel free to roast me. Like, where would you say the team's lacking? Like, if you look at it, like, where do you think moving forward I need to think about focusing my transfers?
You know what? There isn't really an area where I'm looking at it going, there's definitely something needed. I kind of had a look at it on the train when I was on the way down. I was like, this is a really strong team.
Thank you. I didn't pay him to say that, by the way.
Yeah.
I guess the absence of Liverpool is a big, not now because of the fixtures, but moving forward, I need to think about how can I get a Trent or a Salah in there. And if I'm not going to go there, how do I try and get one of Diaz, Gakpo, Jota, whoever's playing well at that point. But yeah, I am generally really happy with it. I've still got my triple Arsenal, who may be going into the trickier fixture and I'll be less happy to have. Maybe it's the squad depth, like Dibbling, Vandenberg, Ait-Nouri as a bench, or Davis as a bench. It's not the strongest bench, so maybe it's taking some money out of a starting spot at some point and distribute. Maybe it's the Solanke position. Solanke to João Pedro, spread the funds around a little bit more. Awesome. Perfect. Well, there we go, guys. That is the Game Week 8 podcast. Hopefully you have enjoyed. Make sure to like and subscribe if you have, and make sure to rate 5-star on audio. please do check out FPL Tom and help him to get towards 10,000 subscribers. If you're still watching right now or listening right now, even if you're listening on audio, head over to YouTube, type in FPL Tom. He's on how many subscribers right now?
About 9.2.
9.2, so only needs like 800 subscribers. We could absolutely get him there. If you're listening right now, please do consider subscribing. And also, my recommendation is to check out his football channel, Tom Langford. Really good sort of travel-related content. There'll be some other stuff there. I was speaking off camera about some very creative ideas for content as well. So I highly recommend checking both channels out. And thank you for coming on the podcast, mate.
Thank you for having me, man. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it's been class. And best of luck for Game Week 8 and beyond. Hopefully you can turn the season around. I'm sure you can with your team, by the way. It's only a matter of time till you have a proper good week. That's what you need, I think.
I really hope so.
Awesome. Well, hopefully you've enjoyed today's FPL Therapy. Thank you very much for watching, and I will catch you next time.